Mama Bola, take this and eat. Thank you so much, my child. God bless you.
The weather was hot, but inside the Victoria Island penthouse, the atmosphere was very cold. The sound of the AC was humming quietly, each hum a tiny drumbeat echoing through the cold, polished marble. Inside, the city glimmered like a sea of gold and neon, yet the warmth of life seemed miles away. Chukwuemeka Emeka Obi stood motionless, a glass of untouched whiskey in hand, his eyes scanning the wall of achievements behind him, awards, certificates, photographs of triumphs. Every accolade whispered the same truth. He had conquered everything, except the one thing his soul quietly yearned for. Emeka, the voice sliced through the silence. Fragile, trembling, but fierce. Mama Ngozi, 70 years young yet regal in her flowing ankara, her frail hands clutching her chest, stepped closer. My son, my only river, your banks are full, but your waters are lonely. Emeka didn't flinch. He'd heard this speech 100 times, felt its weight pressing against his back. But today, something in her eyes, that desperate sparkle of love and worry, pierced deeper than usual. I have told you, Mama, he said, voice steady but tired. I am tired of the hunt, the smiles that follow coin, the words that follow advantage. I am done. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. Done? My son, my river, listen to me. Let me hear the laughter of grandchildren in this house. Let me see the warmth of your heart reflected in someone who loves you. Truly. Emeka turned sharply, the rainlight catching on his sharp jawline. Mama, he said, his tone ironclad, you find her. Bring me a woman with a heart that matches yours. Whoever you choose, I will marry. My word is my bond. The words hung in the air like thunder. Mama Ngozi's eyes widened, not in shock, but in quiet awe. This was her son, the master of empires, the man untouchable by greed, declaring his surrender not to wealth, but to love. And in that moment, Emeka didn't notice the tiniest flicker of a plan forming behind his mother's eyes. A plan that would lead him far beyond glass towers and rain-soaked streets, into the heart of someone who saw the world not for what it had, but for what it could give. Outside, Lagos roared on, oblivious. But inside that penthouse, destiny had already begun to stir. If this kind of stories makes you smile, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below, telling us which part of the world you are watching from. Adawara moved like a shadow through the sprawling rooms, her bare feet silent on the polished floors that reflected a world she would never fully touch. Every surface demanded perfection. Every corner demanded vigilance. Every whisper of dust, every smudge, every forgotten crumb felt like a personal failure under the watchful eyes of the Ajayi's. Useless girl. The voice erupted from the doorway, sharp and bitter like broken glass. Mrs. Ajayi's eyes blazed, her lips twisted in contempt. Your touch is poverty. You bring misfortune wherever you step. Clean where you step, girl. Clean. Adawara flinched but kept her hands moving, scrubbing the floor as if the friction could burn away the sting of words. She bent low, muscles aching, shoulders screaming from hours of toil. Every sweep of the broom was measured, disciplined, precise. She had learned that any falter, any pause, any sign of weariness would be punished, ridiculed, or worse. Her back ached mercilessly, a constant reminder of the work that was never ending. Yet even pain could not break her resolve. She whispered to herself between strokes, barely audible over the hiss of the water bucket against the tiles. One floor at a time. One step at a time. One coin closer to freedom. From her small, hidden pouch she drew a few naira, worn and jingling softly. It was not much, but it was hers, her hope fund. A fragile promise she kept close to her heart. Each coin was a seed of possibility. Each saved Naira a silent rebellion against the cruel life imposed upon her. She tucked the pouch back under her pillow, feeling its weight as both comfort and motivation. Daydreaming again? Mrs. Ajai's voice snapped like a whip. Do I need to remind you what happens to lazy girls? I am not lazy, Ma, Adara said softly, keeping her head bowed. I will finish. I promise. But finishing was never enough. There was always another chore, another indignity, another test. She carried heavy buckets of water, scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, polished silverware that gleamed like mopping mirrors, dusted corners where cobwebs had been hiding for years. The chores multiplied, stretching her body thin, bending her back, bruising her spirit. But she pressed on, a silent force against a world determined to break her. Sometimes she paused for just a heartbeat, leaning against the wall, feeling the ache in her spine and the sting in her hands, and whispered words of encouragement to herself. I can endure. I am stronger than they know. One day, I will be free. One day, my hands will build something more than these walls. At night, she would sit on the thin mat in her room, exhausted but alive. The coins in her pouch were her treasure, her tiny rebellion, her plan for tomorrow. She counted them meticulously, imagining what each could become: a loaf of bread, a brighter meal, a small stall where she could sell something, anything, and breathe without fear. She traced each coin with her fingers, feeling hope pulse through her veins. Fragile but unyielding. And when the day returned, with its unrelenting demands and cruel voices, she rose again, shoulders stiff, back screaming, eyes weary, but with the same determination that had carried her through every beating sun and cold night. She would carry on. She would endure. She would survive. Because somewhere deep inside, Adara knew that endurance was not weakness. It was preparation. Every ache, every insult, every humiliation was a brick in the foundation of the life she would one day build with her own hands. And even in the smallest act, saving a coin here, whispering encouragement there, she was quietly shaping a destiny that no cruelty could ever touch. Mama Ngozi's eyes glimmered with a quiet fire, a spark that belied her years and frailty. There was a plan forming, intricate and daring, one that would test more than wealth, power, or influence. It would test the heart itself. Slowly, deliberately, she began her transformation. The designer Ankara, the silks that whispered of affluence, were stripped away, folded carefully, set aside as though she were laying down a second life she no longer needed. In their place, she draped tattered clothes, faded and patched, the kind of rags that invited scorn and dismissal. She knelt, rubbing ash and dust across her skin, darkening her hands and face, roughening her appearance until she became someone wholly unrecognizable. Am I hidden enough, Mama? She muttered to herself, her voice soft but resolute. She tugged the threadbare shawl tighter across her shoulders. Crouching low, small in a way her tall, commanding frame rarely allowed. A deep exhale left her lips. Yes, this will do, she whispered. Her reflection in the cracked mirror of the old corner shop showed not the queen of penthouses, not the matriarch of empires, but Mama Bola, a poor beggar, unseen by those too busy to notice, overlooked by a world that measured people by the weight of their wallets, the shine of their shoes, the gloss of their hair. With measured steps, she carried herself to a dusty corner between worlds, the intersection of the gleaming and the grinding. Here, she settled onto the cracked cement, spreading out a small, worn mat, placing a battered tin cup before her. She looked around once, noting the faces rushing past, the eyes that never lingered, The hands that waved coins without thought. The shoulders that brushed past without recognition. From a distance, a dark Range Rover slowed at the traffic light. Inside, Emeka's eyes narrowed, first in confusion, then in fascination. Who was this old woman, sitting in tattered clothes? Her skin streaked with ash, her gaze serene yet alert, completely indifferent to the world's disregard. His mother's words echoed, almost whispered into the folds of his memory. "Watch, my son, but do not interfere." A heart is revealed in the unseen act. Emeka's lips pressed into a thin line. "Unseen act?" he murmured, the edge of curiosity sharpening in his eyes. He leaned slightly forward, eyes following every small movement, how she adjusted her shawl, how her hands rested lightly on her knees, how she greeted passers-by with a nod or a gentle smile, never demanding, never begging, only existing with quiet dignity. Mama Bola tilted her head toward a child who had dropped a small piece of bread in her path. "Here, small one," she said softly, her voice gravelly but warm. "Take it before it flies away." The child's eyes widened, gratitude and surprise mingling, before she scurried off, clutching the bread like a treasure. Emeka's breath caught. His mother's lesson was unfolding before him, alive in the most unlikely form. He gripped the steering wheel, torn between instinct and promise, watching how humility and grace moved like light through dust and dirt. Mama Bola, unaware of the powerful eyes upon her, whispered to the wind, almost like a prayer. "Let the heart that sees beyond gold find its way. Let the one who values truth recognize the unseen." Emeka exhaled slowly, a mix of awe and confusion tightening in his chest. He realized then that this was no ordinary act of charity or spectacle. This was a lesson, one that would test the very depths of his soul. And for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something he had long forgotten. Hope, wonder, and the urgent pull of a story yet to be written. Adaure's feet dragged lightly over the dusty path, each step weighted with fatigue. Her arms ached from the early morning chores. Her back protested from bending over buckets, scrubbing floors, lifting heavy loads. Yet she carried herself with a quiet determination, a resolve carved from years of survival under the relentless demands of the Agi's. She clutched the small parcel in her hands, a piece of bread, her only portion for the day. It was not much, but it was all she could spare, and she spared it willingly. The street around her was a chaotic blur. Passers-by jostled and rushed, some casting harsh words over their shoulders. "Old nuisance. Move. Move before you trip someone." A voice snapped sharply, sharp as a whip across her back. Adaure's steps faltered briefly, but her eyes caught sight of her destination, and beyond it, the small figure crouched at the corner. Mama Bola. She was a frail woman wrapped in tattered cloth, skin streaked with ash, eyes quiet and observant beneath her hood. Others ignored her, or worse, scorned her, but Adaure saw her differently. She saw a mother, a human being, deserving of care and dignity. Without hesitation, Adaure slowed, her tired hands unwrapping the bread carefully. She held it out, extending not just food, but a gesture of humanity. "No, Mama," she said softly, voice low, gentle, carrying the warmth that had been starved by years of cruelty. "Eat small." Mama Bola lifted her gaze, surprise flickering in her eyes. Her voice, roughened by time and hardship, wry. "Your stomach will cry." Adaure crouched slightly, her tired back bending in a gesture of respect, her eyes meeting the old woman's. "My stomach knows hunger well, Mama," she said quietly, deliberately, each word weighted with truth. "It is better to share its cry than to let another sing it alone." For a moment, the chaos of the street, the shouting, the sneers, faded away. Only the two of them remained, connected by an invisible thread of empathy, quiet understanding, and unspoken respect. Adawara's voice trembled not from weakness, but from the sincerity of her heart. Mama Bola reached out slowly. Her hands weathered, trembling, and took the bread. "Child," she said softly, eyes studying Adawara with a mixture of wonder and approval. "You have a heart I have rarely seen." Adawara shook her head gently, brushing ash-streaked hair from her face. "It is not strength, Mama," she murmured. "It is all I know. To share even when there is nothing. To give, even when there is nothing left to offer." The old woman nodded, a faint smile breaking through her weathered features. "Then you are wealthier than most," she said, her voice quiet but full of conviction. From a distance, in the darkened tint of a waiting car, Emeka watched. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, pulse tightening. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Watch, my son, but do not interfere." A heart is revealed in the unseen act, and here it was right in front of him. He could see it in the way Adawara had stopped when everyone else rushed by, the gentle way she offered her bread, the soft reverence in her tone, the dignity she maintained even in the smallest act. Her kindness was not performative. It was raw, deliberate, genuine. Emeka exhaled slowly, realizing that wealth, power, and influence had never produced this. He had been trained to recognize success, not quiet courage. He had been taught to measure people by achievement, not heart. And yet here, on this dusty corner, under the indifferent sun, he was seeing a different kind of greatness unfold. Mama Bola tilted her head, studying Adawara with depth, almost as if reading her very soul. "Good hands, child. Hands that give when they have little are hands that shape the world," she said softly, her words gentle but sharp enough to cut through the noise of the street. Adawara's fingers twitched at the praise, brushing the hair from her face again, a soft smile forming. "It is not strength, Mama," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "It is all I know. To give even when I have nothing." And in that quiet exchange of bread, words, and respect, Emeka felt a stirring in his chest, unfamiliar and profound. His eyes lingered on her, understanding for the first time in years that true value was not measured in wealth, titles, or achievements. It was measured in compassion, courage, and the heart that chooses to act when no one is watching. The days blended into one another, a rhythm of exhaustion and small sacred acts. Each morning, Adawara rose before the sun, shoulders stiff, muscles screaming from the endless chores. Yet she carried herself forward with the quiet determination of someone who had learned that survival was a discipline, but kindness was a choice. Her meager pay barely fed her, and her body ached with the accumulated weight of insults, scalding water, heavy buckets, and ceaseless labor. And yet, every day she found something to give. A small piece of moin, carefully wrapped in a scrap of paper. A few chin-chin she had saved from a customer's tray. A piece of fruit she had bartered or scraped together. She didn't just leave it in Mama Bola's tin cup like a token. She sat beside her, if only for a minute, knees brushing dusted ground, hands offering sustenance and heart alike. "How did you sleep, Mama?" she asked softly one morning, brushing ash-streaked hair from her eyes. "The rain did not touch you?" Mama Bola looked up, eyes flickering with the faintest glimmer of approval. "You think of such things, child. Even when the world rushes past, you notice. Why?" Adawara shrugged, a smile tugging at her lips despite the pain in her back. Because someone must. No one else will, and it matters to me." A pause. Mama Bola studied her, leaning back slightly, her eyes tracing the lines of Adawara's weary face, the rough edges of her hands, the quiet strength in her posture. "You have good hands," she said, her voice soft but steady, full of reverence. "Hands that feed are blessed." Adawara's chest tightened. Her eyes dropped to her own hands, calloused, cracked, smeared with ash and soap. Tears welled before she could blink them back. "They call these hands wretched, Mama," she whispered, voice trembling. "They say they bring lack." Mama Bola reached out with deliberate care, cupping Adaua's hands in hers. The old woman's touch was warm and grounding. "No, my child," she said firmly. "No, these are creation hands. They clean lack away. They will build a home. They will plant gardens where none existed before." "Do you hear me?" Adaura blinked rapidly, tears spilling freely now. She traced the lines of her palms with her thumb, as if trying to memorize what the old woman had said. "Build a home," she murmured. The words felt like a fragile promise, something distant yet achingly possible, a spark of hope flickering where there had been only dust and pain. "Yes," Mama Bola replied, her voice soft but unyielding. "Every hand that gives, every hand that nurtures, creates a world. And your hands, Adawa, your hands will create more than survival. They will create life, warmth, shelter, love. Never doubt them." Adaura's lips quivered as she smiled through tears. For the first time in memory, she felt the ache of her labor transform into something sacred. Each moin moin saved, each chin chin tucked aside, each small offering was no longer a token of desperation. It was a seed planted in the soil of her own courage, watered by patience, and nourished by a heart that refused to harden even when the world demanded it. The street passed around them, indifferent. The honking cars, the hurried feet, the sneers of strangers, they might as well have been a distant drumbeat. For these minutes beside Mama Bola, time slowed, stretched and opened. And somewhere, in a tinted car parked quietly across the road, Emeka watched, spellbound. He saw the rhythm, the pattern, the consistency. He saw the girl who, despite insults, despite exhaustion, despite the weight of a life designed to break her, chose to give every day, just a little, even when no one was watching. He felt it in his chest, a tightening and a stirring, something familiar yet foreign. This was not wealth. This was power of the highest order, the power of a pure, unbroken heart. And in that quiet moment, between a piece of bread, a few chin-chin, and the words of an old woman who had chosen disguise over comfort, the story began to take shape. A story that would reach beyond dust and poverty, beyond scorn and cruelty, into the very soul of someone who had forgotten how to see. Emeka's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel of the tinted Range Rover, but his grip tightened, knuckles whitening. He had been watching for days, at first out of curiosity, then out of an uneasy fascination. And now, as the Agi's compound loomed in the distance, he could no longer look away. Inside the house, Adaura moved like a shadow through the endless corridors, carrying trays, lifting buckets, responding to every snap of command with an instinctive obedience that was both graceful and heartbreaking. Her movements were precise, almost choreographed, yet there was a subtle tremor beneath the surface, a fatigue born of unending labor, of backbreaking chores, of words that cut deeper than any slap. "Girl, did I not tell you to polish this silver properly? Do you have eyes to see?" Mrs. Agi barked, her voice sharp and venomous, echoing off the marble walls. "I swear, your touch brings nothing but ruin." Adaura's shoulders hunched under the weight of the insult, but she did not flinch, did not cry, did not retaliate. She simply bent lower, adjusting the cloth over the silver, hands steady despite the tremor of exhaustion. Emeka's chest ached as he watched. The words of his mother rang in his ears again, her calm voice a counterpoint to the chaos before him. "Watch, my son, but do not interfere. A heart is revealed in the unseen act." And yet, watching was agony. Every scornful word, every harsh command, every tiny humiliation inflicted upon her stirred a protective fire in him that clashed violently with his promise. His powerful frame shifted in the driver's seat, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing. He wanted to step in, to stride through the gates, dismiss the ages with a flick of his hand, and scoop Adawara into a world where no one could ever speak to her with such cruelty again. But Mama Ngozi's earlier warning held him back. Do not interfere. Watch. He exhaled slowly, a sharp, deliberate release of tension. His gaze never left her. He watched the way she bore insult with dignity, the way she moved with quiet resilience, the way even in exhaustion her eyes held a glimmer of something stubborn, something unbroken. And then he saw her approach the side door, carrying the small bundle of bread, moving toward the dusty corner where Mama Bola waited. The way she paused, spoke softly, knelt lightly, offered her tiny gift with a gentle smile. Emeka felt a tug in his chest, unfamiliar and unrelenting. Her humility, her grace, her unwavering kindness. It was magnetic. It drew him in, made the roar of the city fade into background noise. And when he glanced toward the Range Rover's passenger seat, he caught a reflection in the tinted glass. Mama Ngozi's face, radiant, alive, lighting up in genuine delight. For the first time, Emeka realized that his mother's heart had been captured long before his own. And yet he could not deny the storm that rose within him, the tug of war between instinct and instruction, desire and discipline, protection and patience. Do I intervene? The thought raced through his mind, sharp and insistent. Do I step in now and save her from all of this suffering? Or do I watch and trust the process? He exhaled again, slower this time, feeling the heat of conflicted emotions coursing through him. He wanted to step out, to sweep her into his arms, to declare that no one would ever dare speak to her so again. But there was something sacred in watching, something that could not be rushed. His mother's words repeated themselves like a mantra. A heart is revealed in the unseen act. And there it was, revealed in every careful movement Adawara made, in the way she bent without complaint, in the way her eyes, tired yet unwavering, held a steady light, in the way her lips curved ever so slightly when she offered kindness, even when the world offered her only cruelty in return. Emeka leaned back in his seat, gripping the wheel less tightly, his mind awash with admiration, frustration, and something deeper, a dawning awareness that this girl, unseen and underestimated by all around her, carried a power greater than wealth, greater than influence, greater than anything he had ever known. And as he watched her walk, small bundle in hand, toward the dusty corner, toward Mama Bola, he realized the truth. He was utterly captivated, heart and soul. Yet still, he did not move. He could only watch. The day began like any other in the Ajay household, but the air carried a heavier weight than usual, thick with tension and scorn. Adawara moved quietly through the grand hall, her arms trembling from the chores that never ended, her back aching from bending over floors that seemed impossible to clean perfectly. She carried a bucket of water, her steps careful, measured, as though one wrong move might summon a storm she could not survive. You! Mrs. Ajay's voice cracked like a whip across the polished marble. What have you done with the silver spoons? You dare touch them? Are you stealing from me, girl? Adawara froze mid-step, the water in her hands trembling. No, Ma, she said softly, voice low, hesitant, careful. I was just bringing them for polishing. Lies, the Ajay matriarch barked. Lies and thievery. You will learn your place. Pour it all, every drop, on the floor. The cold water hit the marble floor with a shocking splash. Adawara's chest tightened, the shock of injustice freezing her momentarily. that she moved quickly, picking up mop and cloth, cleaning what she had just carried. Sweat and water mingling on her skin. Each movement was careful, precise, almost graceful, but inside, her heart was heavy, bruised by words she did not deserve. And yet, even amid the shame and the exhaustion, even with the sneers echoing in her ears and the sharp words tearing at her spirit, her thoughts drifted elsewhere, to the dusty corner she had come to cherish, to Mama Bola. By the time the last of the water was scrubbed away, Adaure's hands were raw, her back aching, her uniform soaked and heavy. Yet she tucked the mop aside, grabbed the small cup of water she had saved for herself, and walked toward the corner where Mama Bola waited. The old woman looked up as Adaure approached, eyes flickering with recognition and warmth. The cup she offered was no longer a loaf of bread or a small morsel of food. It was a shared cup of water, humble and small, yet richer than anything she had offered before. "Here, Mama," Adaure said softly, voice heavy but tender. "A little water for you. Sit with me?" Mama Bola's lips curved into a faint smile. "Sit, child. You carry more than water, it seems. You carry courage." Adaure settled beside her, knees brushing the dusty ground, hands cupping the small offering between them. For a long moment, silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but profound. A shared understanding that went deeper than words. Finally, Adaure spoke, voice quivering as she let the weight of her thoughts slip free. "Sometimes, Mama, I feel like a candle in this Lagos wind. One strong gust, and my light is gone. I try so hard, but everything keeps blowing against me. I feel so small, so invisible." Mama Bola reached out, taking Adaure's hands in hers, rough and warm, grounding. She drew her close, as though holding not just her hands, but her very soul. "Listen to an old woman, my child," she said gently, voice soft but carrying the authority of years and wisdom. "It is the smallest candle that lights the darkest room. The wind does not blow it out. It only makes its flame dance. You are dancing, my child, and someone is watching your dance." Adaure blinked, tears threatening, spilling freely down her cheeks. "Dancing," she whispered, as though tasting the word for the first time. Her lips trembled into a fragile smile. "Even with everything against me?" Mama Bola squeezed her hands, a reassuring pressure that carried strength and truth. "Even then, especially then, the world may try to silence you, tear at your edges, pour cold water over your light. But your heart, you'll always shine. And some eyes that matter are already seeing it, even when the world pretends not to." Adaure rested her head against the old woman's shoulder, letting herself feel the quiet affirmation, the small flame of hope reigniting within her. She was exhausted, battered, humiliated by the relentless cruelty of the Ajaes. Yet here, beside Mama Bola, she felt seen. She felt understood. And for a moment, the wind no longer seemed like a threat. It seemed like a partner, a force that made her flame dance. A reminder that even in the harshest storm, her light had power. Across the street, behind the darkened window of the Range Rover, Emeka leaned forward, his breath shallow, eyes locked on her. He saw every movement, every small gesture, every flicker of resilience and courage. He felt it in his chest, tight and overwhelming, the recognition of something rare, unbroken, unbuyable, and utterly captivating. And in that quiet exchange of water, words, and understanding, a bond formed, unspoken yet profound, a seed of admiration and something deeper, something irresistible that would not let him turn away. The city pulsed with its usual chaos, the streets alive with honking cars, vendors shouting, and the faint, distant clatter of a life that refused to pause. Yet, inside his office, Emeka sat in silence. The hum of the city reduced to background noise as his mind ran over the girl he had been watching for days. Adawa. He had watched her courage, her small acts of kindness, her unwavering dignity under the weight of cruelty. That curiosity had turned into something deeper, a compulsion to understand the life behind the small, fierce flame he had been witnessing. He made discreet inquiries, small, careful questions that uncovered what she had endured. The tragic loss of her parents, leaving her orphan too young to grieve properly. The relentless work under the Agias, who measured her by convenience and scorn. The tiny savings she hid away, her hope fund, a fragile reservoir of possibility built with meticulous care. And through it all, he discovered her character unyielding, honest, generous, even when she had almost nothing. Every story, every account, confirmed what he had already suspected. This girl, battered by circumstance, had a soul untouched by bitterness. He decided to act, but not in the way most men in his position would. He would not swoop in with money or gifts. He would not buy loyalty or affection. No. He would create space for her life to breathe, for her light to grow freely. Her rent, paid in full for an entire year. A small food stall set up in her name, anonymous but secure, a foundation for her independence. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to attract attention. Just the tools for her to survive and thrive, without the shadow of her daily struggle pressing down. And then came the 8th day. Adawara approached the dusty corner with a spring in her step, her arms carrying 2 small meat pies. She laughed lightly, a sound so rare, so pure, that it felt almost like a melody rising above the chaos of the city. She had sold her only good scarf to buy them, yet her eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief and joy that had been denied to her for so long. "Today we feast, Mama," she said, voice bright, lifting the pies like treasures. Her laughter was infectious, spilling into the dusty air, curling around Mama Bola and warming the corner in a way that sunlight could not. Mama Bola, still in her disguise of tattered shawls and ash-streaked skin, reached for the pies with a soft smile. "Ah, you've outdone yourself, child," she said, her voice filled with warmth and pride. Adawara set the pies down carefully, wiping her hands on her apron, and laughed again, louder this time. "No, Mama, it is you who deserves the feast. I only brought the bread. The rest is joy we share." From across the street, hidden behind the dark tint of the Range Rover, Emeka watched. And for the first time, he saw her truly smile. Not polite, not measured, not cautious, but the kind of pure, unrestrained joy that made the world stop if only for a heartbeat. Something broke inside him at that moment. Not a physical breaking, but a crack in the armor he had built over decades of power and control. Seeing her laugh, watching her resilience bloom into happiness, despite the weight of her life, it struck him with a force he could not ignore. He exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. His eyes stayed fixed on her, memorizing the curve of her smile, the light in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed just slightly as she laughed. "This is what I've been waiting for," he whispered to himself. "This light, this joy, it is not for me to command. It is only for me to witness, and perhaps to protect quietly." And in that moment, the line between observer and participant blurred. He was no longer merely watching. He was caught, captivated, utterly undone by the smallest flame he had ever seen. And he knew, with a clarity that startled him, that his life would never be the same again. Adawara, meanwhile, laughed again, offering a small piece of pie to Mama Bola. "Eat, Mama. It is ours. Our tiny feast in a big, crazy world." Mama Bola's eyes softened, and her hand covered Adawara's. "Yes, child, ours. And may this joy, small as it is, remind you always of the strength you carry. Even the smallest flame can illuminate the darkest night. Emeka watched, heart hammering, knowing he could never intervene in the ordinary way, yet feeling more powerless and inspired than he ever had in the gilded walls of his office. He could not touch her life, he could only honor it, protect it, and hope that one day, the full brilliance of her heart would reveal itself to the world. And to him, Adawa's feet pounded the uneven ground, her steps light and quick, heart buoyant from the anticipation of another quiet moment with Mama Bola. Today, she had something special, a small loaf of bread she had saved for herself, meant to share, to offer, to laugh over with the old woman. Her mind danced with the small joys of the day, the fleeting escape from the endless labor of the Ajayas, the ache of her back forgotten for just a moment. But when she reached the dusty corner, the space that had become a sanctuary, her stomach dropped. Empty. No Mama Bola. The small tin cup lay abandoned, its contents long since gone. The tattered shawl fluttered in the wind, dust swirling where the old woman had always sat. Adawa froze, chest tightening, fear prickling through her veins. "Mama," she called, voice sharp, urgent, cracking under the strain of panic. "Mama Bola, where are you?" Her hands shook, clutching the bread as if holding it tighter could summon the woman back. She looked around frantically, eyes scanning every shadow, every passerby, every corner where the old woman might have disappeared. Her pulse raced. Has something happened to her? The thought hit her like a punch. Her heart thudded violently against her ribs. She took a hesitant step forward, then another. The bread clutched tightly against her chest. Every moment stretched, the silence of the street pressing against her. Her lips quivered as fear twisted into dread. Then a sound, a deep, steady hum of an engine, refined and deliberate, cutting through the quiet like a knife through cloth. The sleek Range Rover glided to a smooth stop just a few feet away. Its black sheen reflected the sunlight, polished to perfection, almost regal in its stillness. The door opened, and there he was, Emeka Obi, immaculate. Every inch the man the magazines had splashed across glossy pages. Sharp suit tailored to perfection, shoes glinting, a presence that commanded the space without needing a word. His gaze was steady, unflinching, but his eyes held something deeper, something that hinted at what she could not yet understand. Adawa's chest tightened, her breath catching. Recognition struck her, a sharp pulse of disbelief. It's him, the man from the magazines, the one they say is untouchable, the most eligible bachelor in Nigeria. Fear prickled along her spine. She shrank back instinctively, almost instinctively pressing herself against the wall, as though making herself smaller might make her invisible. Her voice trembled as she tried to find the words, her heart pounding. I didn't, she began, faltering. Her hands twisted the bread nervously. Sir, I have done nothing. Please. I will go, I will leave. I did not. Emeka did not speak. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, measured, his eyes never leaving hers. The air between them was taut, charged, electric. He exuded authority, elegance, and yet there was a gentleness in the way he moved, a restraint that made the impossible seem possible. Adawa's mind raced. She assumed the worst. He had come to clear the corner, to assert his place, to make sure some important person could sit where she had found her small refuge. Perhaps she was in the way. Perhaps she was nothing in his eyes. Her pulse raced, her chest tight, her grip on the bread almost painful. Her legs wanted to run, to flee before the moment became unbearable. She felt small, exposed, and acutely aware of the gulf between the life she lived and the life he embodied. But even in her fear, she could not help noticing the subtlety of him, the way he moved, careful, unhurried. The way his eyes lingered, observing, not accusing. His silence spoke louder than words ever could. And in that charged stillness, the world seemed to pause. Dust swirled at her feet. Distant sounds faded into a muted hum, and all that remained was the two of them. A girl who had suffered and given silently, and a man who had watched, captivated, and now stood before her. A presence both terrifying and impossible to ignore. Her voice faltered again, trembling, soft. "Sir, I... But he did not interrupt. He simply stepped closer, each movement measured, deliberate, with a quiet authority that demanded attention, yet withheld judgment. Adawa's heart raced, her mind spinning. The bread in her hands felt absurdly heavy. She realized, with a jolt, that this was no ordinary encounter. Something monumental was about to happen. Something that would break the rhythm of her life forever. She swallowed hard, taking a tentative step back, eyes wide. I will move, sir. I will leave." And still he said nothing. The street seemed to hold its breath. Dust hung suspended in the air. Wind paused mid-whisper, and the world contracted to the space between Adawara and the man standing before her. Emeka moved, deliberately, silently, closing the distance between them. Each step carried a weight of certainty, of purpose, of something far greater than wealth or power. Adawara's heart hammered, her hands clutching the bread she had brought as if it could protect her. She stepped back instinctively, but he did not stop. He did not speak. He simply lowered himself to one knee, the dust rising softly around him, settling like a hush over the moment. From the folds of his impeccably tailored suit, he produced a small velvet box. He opened it with deliberate care, revealing a diamond ring unlike any Adawara had ever seen. Its shape was delicate, almost alive, a small, gentle flame, soft yet burning with a quiet intensity. The sunlight caught it, scattering tiny sparks across the dusty street. For a heartbeat, the street itself seemed to pause. Vendors froze mid-call, children stopped chasing their friends. A passing car slowed as if the city itself recognized the enormity of what was happening. Silence fell heavy and absolute. Adawara's breath hitched. Her hands went to her mouth, eyes wide, tears threatening to spill. "Sir, I have done nothing. Please, I will go," she stammered, voice trembling with terror, disbelief, and the incomprehensible weight of the moment. Her instincts screamed to flee, to vanish, to escape this impossible scene. But before she could move, the sleek car door opened again. Another presence emerged, and the air shifted. Mama Ngozi stepped out. Gone was the tattered shawl, the ash-streaked disguise of Mama Bola. Now she stood radiant, regal in expensive iro and buba. Her hair perfectly tied, each movement commanding respect and admiration. She looked at Adawara with a softness and pride that could melt the hardest heart. "Adawara," she called, her voice familiar yet transformed, filled with warmth, authority, and recognition. Adawara froze, every muscle stiff, mind spinning. "Mama. Bola." The words barely left her lips. Disbelief tangled with awe, fear, and a rising tide of emotion she could not name. Mama Ngozi moved toward her, every step deliberate, carrying the weight of revelation and love. She reached out, pulling Adawara into a warm, enveloping embrace. The old fear, the exhaustion, the years of struggle seemed to melt into that single moment of recognition and safety. "My daughter," Mama Ngozi said, voice steady, resonant, full of conviction and pride. "For 9 days you fed not a beggar, but a searching heart. You saw a person, not a circumstance. You gave your last, not your leftover. I was looking for a wife for my son, and God showed me a queen for my family." Adawara trembled in her mother's arms, tears flowing freely now, hot and uncontrollable. She could hardly breathe, hardly think, caught between the terror of the unknown and the overwhelming surge of relief and validation. Her gaze flicked back to Emeka, still kneeling in the dust, the flame-shaped diamond catching the sunlight, reflecting a brilliance that seemed almost alive. The man who had been a distant, untouchable figure in magazines, in headlines, now knelt before her, not as a symbol of power, but as a man transformed by what he had seen, by the heart he had witnessed, by the courage and grace of someone he had never sought to change, only to honor. Adaure's lips quivered as she tried to find words, to make sense of the impossible truth. She shook her head, laughing and crying at once. The weight of her life, her kindness, her endurance, all finally recognized. Mama Ngozi held her close, whispering, "My daughter, this is your reward. Your heart has been seen. Your life, your courage. It has led you here." The street seemed to exhale. Time resumed its rhythm, but nothing would ever feel ordinary again. And in that perfect, suspended moment, Adawa understood. The life she had endured, the kindness she had given, the love she had not yet realized she deserved, it had all led to this. The dust settled around them, the street finally breathing again after the weight of revelation. Adawa stood frozen, heart hammering so fiercely it seemed to echo in her ears. She could hardly grasp the enormity of the moment. The man she had once watched from a distance, the man whose life seemed untouchable, was here before her, kneeling, vulnerable in a way that only the soul allows. Emeka's eyes never left hers, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick, trembling with something rare emotion unmasked by power, unshaped by expectation. It was a sound that resonated with truth, that carried the weight of admiration, respect, and awe. "I watched you," he began, each word deliberate, breaking the silence like a gentle drumbeat. "I watched you build a palace with kindness, when you had no bricks. You carried more than I could bear to see, yet you never faltered. Not once. Every day I saw you give, and give, and give again, until even the smallest of offerings shone like gold." Adaura's lips parted, her throat tight, tears prickling at the edges of her eyes. She could not speak. The enormity of his words pressed into her chest like a heavy yet precious stone. "I saw you wear compassion as a crown," he continued, voice now raw, trembling with intensity. "They called you wretched, undeserving, invisible, but you held your head high. You let your heart rule your hands. You made the world kinder even when it was cruel to you." Her hands lifted slightly, trembling, unsure whether to reach for him, for Mama Ngozi, or to simply stay rooted in the miracle of the moment. "Adaura," he said, voice dropping, intimate, almost breaking with the weight of confession. Will you teach me?" She blinked, confusion and disbelief mingling with the rapid thrum of her heart. "Will you let me build a world?" he continued, swallowing hard, eyes glistening, "where your light never fears the wind, where your laughter is never shadowed by cruelty, where the hands that have fed others, that have wiped tears, that have cleaned hardship from the world, can finally rest in a life worthy of you." He paused, hands resting lightly on his knees in the dust, as if the ground itself could bear witness to his plea. The flame-shaped ring sparkled, catching the fading light, a small sun burning in the palm of his hand. "Will you marry me?" His words were soft now, a prayer, a hope, a surrender. Adaura's knees weakened, and she sank slowly to the ground, hands clasped over her mouth. Her heart raced, her mind spun, and yet, through the whirlwind of disbelief and emotion, clarity emerged. All the years of hardship, all the scorn, all the times she had given from an empty hand. It had been seen. Not by strangers, not by chance, but by a man who had watched without interruption, who had honored her struggles and her heart. Tears streamed freely down her face now, warm and unstoppable, carving paths over the dust and sweat of the day. Emeka, she whispered, voice choked, trembling yet certain. I will marry you. The weight of the world seemed to lift, replaced by a profound, almost sacred stillness. Emeka's face broke into a smile, small at first, then broad, genuine and radiant. He rose slowly, hands extending, and she took them without hesitation, letting herself be lifted, letting herself be seen, letting herself believe in the impossible. Mama Ngozi watched, eyes glistening with pride and joy, as the two souls, one tested by hardship, one humbled by witness, found each other in the dust, in the quiet, in the moment where the world itself seemed to stand still, honoring the power of a heart that refuses to be broken. And for Adawara, that single phrase, "I will marry you," was more than a promise. It was a recognition, a reward, a new beginning. Adawara's tears fell freely now, not the quiet tears of hidden pain she had learned to swallow in silence, but the kind that come when a heart finally understands what it has carried for too long. Her eyes moved slowly, trembling, from the radiant face of Mama Ngozi to the man still kneeling in the dust, powerful yet stripped of all pride in this moment. In that fragile space between them, the truth rose gently, clearly, like dawn breaking over a long night. This was not mockery. This was not a cruel joke of the rich. This was not a trap laid by power. It was a test she had walked through unknowingly, barefoot, with nothing but her heart as her guide. Her lips quivered as understanding settled deep within her chest. All the days she had shared her hunger, all the moments she had offered kindness when she had nothing else to give, all the times she had chosen to see a person instead of a condition, they had been seen, not by the world that had trampled her, but by the one who mattered in this moment. She looked again at Mama Ngozi, whose eyes shone with a mother's pride, then back at Emeka, whose gaze held no command now, only hope. "Adawara," Mama Ngozi said softly, stepping closer, her voice warm with certainty. "My daughter, your kindness spoke before your mouth ever did. Your heart answered questions you were never asked." Emeka's voice was barely above a whisper. "I am not kneeling because I am rich," he said, swallowing hard. "I am kneeling because I am small before the kind of woman you are." Mama Ngozi held her hands firmly. "No, my child. You are a woman who chose to love when the world taught her to harden. That is not small." Adawara closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the moment, breathing out the years of being unseen. When she opened them again, her gaze steadied. She looked at Emeka, still kneeling, dust on his knees, truth in his eyes. Her head nodded, slow, deliberate, as though sealing a covenant with her own heart. "Yes," she said softly. The word was small, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. Not long after, she stood once more before the gates she had passed through countless times with bowed head and weary steps. This time, she did not come alone. Mama Ngozi stood beside her, regal, composed. Emeka stood just behind, silent, respectful, letting her face her past on her own terms. The doors opened and familiar eyes widened in disbelief. The same mouths that had once poured insults now struggled to find words. Mrs. Ajayi's voice faltered. "Adawara, what is all this? Who are these people?" Adawara stood tall, her back straight, her voice calm, free of bitterness. "I came to resign," she said gently. A hush fell. The air felt heavy with unspoken shame. You are leaving?" Another voice muttered, unsure, unsettled. "Yes," Adara replied. I have found my way forward. Mrs. Ajay scoffed weakly, trying to gather her old authority. So after everything, you just walk away? Adara met her eyes, not with anger, not with pride, but with a quiet dignity that startled them more than any outburst could have. I did not come to fight, she said. I came to close a chapter. She paused, her voice steady, grounded. Thank you for the work. I wish you well. No curse, no triumph, no bitterness, just release. She turned away from the place that had once defined her suffering, her steps light, her past finally loosened from her shoulders. As she walked beside her new family, the weight of yesterday fell behind her, and for the first time, her future did not feel like something she had to beg for. The celebration rose like a living song, rich and layered, woven from two worlds that had never before touched so closely. Music carried both softness and thunder. Laughter rippled through silk and simple cloth alike, and joy shimmered in every corner of the gathering. Those who had known Adara from the days of quiet suffering stood shoulder to shoulder, with those who had only ever known polished floors and soft voices of service. No one felt small today. No one felt out of place. Adara stood radiant in white, her dress flowing around her like light itself, her face glowing with a peace that came not from luxury, but from arrival from the long journey of a heart that had walked through fire and come out gentle. She looked around, eyes shining, and whispered softly to Emeka, "This joy, it feels too big for my chest." Emeka smiled, taking her hand, his voice low and full of wonder. Then let it overflow. We did not come here to contain joy. We came to share it. Beyond the gates, just outside the reach of the music and the lights, the street vendors and cleaners who had kept the world moving even on this day stood quietly, watching from a distance. Some held their tools loosely, others clutched empty trays, unsure whether they were meant to be seen. Their eyes followed the celebration with a mixture of admiration and resignation, as though beauty was something to be witnessed, not entered. Adara's gaze found them. Her smile softened, then deepened with resolve. She paused, her hand tightening around Emeka's. They are here, she murmured. Emeka followed her eyes. He nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. Then we go to them, he said simply. She lifted the tray herself, the white of her gown brushing against the edge of the moment, and stepped toward those who had been invisible to many, but never to her. The murmurs of the crowd softened into a hush as she moved, not as a bride being displayed, but as a daughter of the streets returning to her people. One of the cleaners shifted uneasily. Madam, please. We are fine here, he said, bowing his head. Adara knelt slightly to meet his eyes, her voice warm, steady. No one is fine where love is kept away, she replied. Come, eat with us. She placed food into their hands, one by one, her movements gentle, familiar, as though she had never left this place of simple giving. Mama, take. You have worked since morning, she said to a woman whose hands were rough with labor. The woman's eyes filled with tears. You are the bride, she whispered, trembling. Adara smiled. I am still a daughter who knows hunger, she said softly. Emeka joined her. Sleeves rolled slightly, laughter in his eyes as he served beside her. If she is feeding you, I must also feed you, he said, offering plates with an ease that surprised those who had only known him as a distant figure of power. One of the vendors chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. So this is how rich people serve now? Emeka laughed lightly. No, this is how human beings serve. Adara glanced at him, eyes shining. This is the world I prayed for without knowing its name, she whispered. He leaned closer. Then let us keep building it, one plate at a time. The street vendors and cleaners ate with quiet gratitude, some wiping tears, some laughing through disbelief, all of them touched by a moment that told them they were seen. The celebration behind them continued, music swelling. But the most powerful song was the one playing in this small circle of shared dignity. And in her stunning white, Adara did not look like a queen above her people. She looked like one among them, standing in the fullness of her story, turning joy into a bridge, and love into something that could be held, tasted, and shared. 5 years had softened the sharp edges of the world they once knew. Their home no longer breathed silence or echoed with the lonely footsteps of success. It pulsed with laughter, small feet racing through corridors, voices calling out in overlapping joy. Children's laughter spilled from room to room like sunlight, warm, careless, alive. Adara stood in the middle of it all, her hands busy, her heart fuller than she had ever imagined possible. Slow down, she laughed, reaching for a child darting past her. If you fall again, you will tell me the floor pushed you, Abi. The child grinned, eyes bright. The floor is my enemy, Mama, he teased, then ran back into the noise. Emeka watched from the doorway, a soft smile resting on his face, the kind of smile that had learned how to stay. The hardness that once guarded his eyes had long melted into something gentler. He stepped forward, lifting another child into his arms. Come here, troublemaker. Let me save you from the wicked floor, he said, pressing a kiss to the child's forehead. Adara met his eyes across the room, a quiet understanding passing between them. Can you believe this is our life? She murmured. Emeka exhaled slowly, as if savoring the truth of it. I used to think a full house was noise, he said. Now I know it is music. Later, her voice carried a different weight, as she spoke of her work, eyes bright with purpose. Mama Bola's Haven has opened 3 more centers, Adara said, her tone steady, hopeful. The women came in tired, some of them ashamed to even speak of what they have endured. But when they found beds, warm food, and listening ears, they remembered they were human again. Emeka nodded, his gaze thoughtful. One of the women I met today said she had never been called by her name in years. They only called her girl. He paused, jaw tightening briefly. I told my board today that numbers do not grow people, but people grow numbers. The room went quiet. Then something shifted. Adara reached for his hand. That is how change begins, she said softly. With a quiet room and a brave truth. He squeezed her hand, eyes warm. You taught me that empathy is not weakness. It is strength with a heartbeat. The children's laughter rose again, wrapping the moment in lightness. Adara looked around at the life they had built. The foundation that carried the name of a woman who once sat in dust and ash. The man who once believed only in walls of glass and steel. We are still learning, she said gently. But at least now we are learning together. Emeka smiled, his voice low, sincere. And every lesson feels like a blessing. The family sat close, their shoulders touching, their presence weaving a quiet circle of belonging. Mama Ngozi rested at the center, her eyes soft with years, her smile carrying the gentle authority of a woman who had lived long enough to see prayers become people. The children leaned into Adara and Emeka, warm, unguarded, their small hands finding comfort in familiar arms. The room breathed with peace, the kind that comes not from silence, but from love that has learned how to stay. Mama Ngozi chuckled softly, her voice tender with affection. When I prayed for grandchildren, I did not know God would answer with a whole house of laughter, she said, smoothing a child's hair. Emeka smiled, glancing at Adara. You see, Mama, your prayers did not just bring laughter. They brought teachers into my life. Adara lowered her gaze, humbled. We are all still learning, she replied gently. Even love learns. One of the children looked up, curious. Mama, why do people look at clothes first before they look at faces? Adara's breath caught. She drew the child closer, her eyes lifting slowly, as if finding the camera, finding every heart listening beyond the walls. Her voice softened, steady and sure, carrying the weight of truth shaped by years of quiet giving. "The world will often show you a shell," she said, each word clear, deliberate. "Tattered clothes, a shiny car, a big title. Do not look at the shell. Look for the heart beating inside." Emeka nodded slowly, his voice low with agreement. "Because shells can lie. Hearts rarely do." Adara continued, her tone warm, grounded in lived wisdom. "The richest soil is not found on the surface, but deep within. That is where real harvest grows." She paused, eyes glistening, her gaze steady on the unseen listeners. "And true wealth is never measured in what you have, but in what you give away." Mama Ngozi reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "My daughter speaks the truth of a long road," she said. "May those who hear it walk kinder paths." The children leaned closer, the moment wrapping around them like a blessing. The family's quiet laughter followed, soft and unforced, as if the world, for once, had learned to sit and listen.